Hey, I want to talk you through a little bit of what is entailed when we are looking at the copywriting component of your actual outreach campaigns. So a classic, for example, mistake that sometimes happens when doing outreach is that appropriate consideration isn't given to two things. Number one, of course, when you're running outreach to a particular decision maker or a particular kind of job title owner within an industry, what are the typical types of emails that they're used to receiving, right? So if I'm Frank and I'm a HR executive at a Fortune 500 company, then I am very used to receiving a typical email that is an introduction to somebody's services. I'm used to being perhaps cold pitched, and I'm more importantly used to having perhaps a very, very busy inbox. So with all of these things in mind, you need to consider, how should an email look and feel in terms of professionalism? How can you create the appropriate pattern interrupt? Let me explain what I mean by pattern interrupt. So what I mean by that is that there needs to be enough of a similarity with the messaging that you send, but there needs to also be something that kind of shocks Frank into actually, responding. Now, the difficulty plus the opportunity with someone like Frank is getting a lot of emails. He's getting loads of emails, right? So that means he's become a little bit immune, a little bit like, when a, lady goes to a restaurant, or rather a pub or a club, she's expecting to be accosted by men. Frank is expecting to be accosted by, people offering services, or rather, he's more used to being accosted by tons of emails. Okay, so that's kind of the kind of opportunity as well as the opportunity cost. So we need to factor a couple of these things into mind. The second element of it is, what and how does the email look in terms of feel? Is sending it from a personal email account better, or is sending it from a company account better? Because one of the advantages with personal accounts is that it's almost like it's coming from a friend. The advantage with a professional account is it's almost like coming from a company, right? So we think about the ideal components of who is an ideal client for your company. The other thing with thinking about something like that Frank, the HR executive at a Fortune 500 company, is one of perhaps then 500 people, is in that instance, right, a market that is scalable. If we're running at even a, for example, 10, let's say a 20% response rate over 500 people, we're looking at 100 responses. Then we're maybe looking at, let's say 50 calls. And then we might look at 5 conversions. Maybe we're looking at 10 conversions. Is 10 conversions enough to support, what you're trying to offer as a business? And how quickly will we get through that market? Is it scalable? Is it too small? Is that just, one industry? Do we need to expand to other industries? So there's all of these kind of nuances that come in terms of, well, what does that mean in terms of layers of personalization and levels of personalization? Moving further forward, then you begin to look at, of course, the initial copy guidelines. So we've got Frank, the HR executive, or maybe we've got, Mary, the marketing manager at a small digital marketing consultancy, and you want to sell her, for example, lead generation, or you want to sell her, your SaaS software, you want to sell her whatever it may be. So Mary, the marketing manager, might be a lot more of a sophisticated marketer than Frank, the HR executive, because Mary does marketing as part of her role. Who is Mary more likely to respond to? Is it going to be female? Is it going to be male? What is an appropriate job title? What can we write in terms of titles that are disarming? Does anyone like to be approached by a sales manager? What's the perception? So once you begin to factor in all of these spaces, right, total addressable market, the actual, expected profile or persona of someone that they'll respond to, the pattern interrupts that make sense, you can then begin to ultimately write these initial scripts, and this is based upon my personal experience of having got tens of millions of views on Quora. I got 20 plus million views, over 1,100 answers that were that I wrote. These were written, and I was the top writer across industries such as romance, dating, relationships, recruitment, getting a job at Google, entrepreneurship, lead generation, digital marketing. These are just 8 traveling. Lots of. I was top rated in over 50 different areas. Furthermore, we've been lucky and fortunate to have got over 1.5 million views for a LinkedIn status update. So all of these factors, right, as well as publications that we've been in, really come into play when thinking about, viral content, but also copywriting content that's designed to get a response. And with part of this, we'll then develop, a couple of scripts which we would have you sign off upon, as well as a couple that we absolutely recommend that you use. And we're happy to run split tests. So there's always going to be a component of copy that we want to use, and we're happy to split test that against copy that you think that will work, and it will surprise you as to what actually generates the responses. So all of these components are involved in the actual copywriting process. So that is the level of service you can expect if you get on board with Pearl Lemon Leads.